Today we're going to deal with a couple really big topics, um, concepts, topics such as a universal human need and the idea of where are we ultimately going. What's our national and personal end goal, end game? Where are we trying to shoot for in life, right? Um, is there such a thing? Does that exist? Is there a destiny that we could have that we can share collectively as a people? Um, is there one core element that motivates us to become who we are and also to inspire others to kind of find that for themselves? Now, we know that there are lots of books written about the topic of kind of finding yourself and establishing a trek for yourself. I think over time we become afraid a little bit of this idea of having a destiny because destiny sort of implies fixed, and it also implies I have to try to get there, and also implies if I don't get there, right, I've missed out somehow. And I think a lot of these concepts are a little bit intimidating, a little bit scary to the average person that's living in day out life, not really sure where they're going and not really sure what inspires them and how do you find inspiration and what does it really mean. So we have a great privilege to start the new book of start a new book of the Torah, book number 4, right, which is the book of Bamidbar, which is in Hebrew that means in the desert. That's in English what Hebrew means, right? Where the Jewish people are encamped and basically chill out 40 years in the desert, waiting to go to their national homeland, Israel, and imbibing and imbuing and building up this spiritual inspirational experience that they had, which was called Mount Sinai, the Jewish people getting to Mount Sinai. See, the interesting thing is the Mount Sinai story, the Jewish people getting the Torah, this concept of mass revelation of God, so to speak, speaking to all the people, that literally took a couple of verses in a book in a long time ago, in the second book, the book of Exodus. It's like one detail, right? It's amazing because all of human history is leading up until this mass revelation, right? This is the thing that Adam should have seen, and that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that we go down to Egypt, and everyone's waiting in Egypt for this, and we come out, we have this mass revelation, and it's literally like it's in a parsha that's named after somebody else, right? It doesn't have its own name. It's not labeled in the Torah portion as the Torah portion where we get the Torah, right? And then we kind of like just move on, right? And then there's a book of the laws, and then we spend this whole time in the desert, and it seemingly is very anticlimactic. So the big question, which I'm going to go into a little bit, is why is it that so much time is developed on the Jews in the desert, having already had that period of inspiration where God so to speak, appeared and said shalom and told everyone what the point of life is, and before we get to our national destiny, where we're supposed to be playing out that period of inspiration that we had a long time ago. So it's not my question, really. I'm going to go through the basics of what the Pri Tzaddik, a very famous Hasidic Rebbe, talks about. But he brings down, the very beginning of the book of Bamidbar, of going into the desert, which just for fun, is we actually got there on the first of the month of Sivan, which, as of when I'm giving this talk, will be like 6 days ago, right? But the Jewish people, according to what it says in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, 2 books ago, it says this very interesting language about how the Jews got to Mount Sinai. It says in the 3rd month, that's this month, Sivan, after Bnei Yisrael's departure from the land of Egypt, it says we depart from Egypt, on that day they came to the desert. They had journeyed from Rephidim and they had come to the desert. They camped in the desert. Israel camped there opposite the mountain. So the Pri Tzaddik brings out there's 4 different terms. They had come, they came, then they camped, and then the Jewish people all camped. So he basically, brilliantly, as he does, explains that these 4 terms symbolize how a person can go about becoming inspired, growing into that aspiration, acquiring that aspiration, and then making it a part of their life to move forward. And that would be very interesting. How do we go into that? So he explains there are 4 stages in true, profound growth. Stage number 1 is your inspirational stage. Stage number 2, I'm using his language, is the realization stage. Stage number 3 is the internalization stage. And stage number 4 is the unification stage. And they're all represented by these 4 terms. What the heck does that mean? Let's go a little bit more into it. It says that they had came from Egypt, came in the past, right? And so he says that that's the definition of inspiration. Now, inspiration, the moment of clarity where you have this breakthrough, you have this experience of, wow, right? So that's spurred on by two things, and I'd like to say that I think that they come very nicely one after the other. It says that they left Egypt, and then what they experienced after Egypt was that they had to leave someplace and they had an experience. So one of the primary concepts, if a person wants to become inspired, is they have to be able to sort of leave the familiarity of their background. Now, we would think to ourselves improperly, right? To leave Egypt was a very difficult thing, right? Because we think that it's not a difficult thing to leave Egypt because Egypt was terrible. Comes out that the Jewish people were complaining for years afterwards. We had it so good in Egypt. What does that mean? How do you have so good in Egypt? You were a slave. You were having a horrific time. So now, really according to the history, that only a certain part of the time where Egypt was really, really bad. The rest of it, we were living very nicely, and we owned real estate and all kinds of stuff, right? But what was this concept? How could we long to go back to the land of our captivity? So the answer is that the captivity was familiar. Right? A famous book called Who Moved My Cheese, right? In life, we find these sensations, we find these stations, these times where we're comfortable and we have what we want and we're happy. And then eventually the cheese leaves, right? Eventually we find ourselves that the same things that made us happy or what we were doing or our business, that things dry up, right? And we're not able to get there and we're not able to come back and we kind of freak out. And the number one way to remain locked in is to stay there kind of wanting to find the glory in the same place you found it before. You have to leave. You have to get out of your environment and you have to go out into the world. So step number one, it explains you have to leave your current situation. Step number two is once you are out, and this is a really crazy concept that anyone who didn't have like very serious changes in their life probably would never tell you, right? We think that when we leave familiarity, we are uncomfortable until we get to our new destination, which in a lot of cases we don't even know where that is yet, right? But what Tzaddik is telling us is that you find inspiration on the road to where you're trying to get to. You will leave your comfort. You will freak out. You'll be miserable. And all of a sudden you realize it's not death wandering in an area you don't know. It's not death. You actually can still survive. You will find that there's moments you're like, wow, I'm actually doing okay. And even though you have no idea where your life's going, at that point, you will be awed and inspired to realize that you are greater than you thought. You could survive outside of your comfort zone. That there'll be miracles that'll happen. Like that God will just randomly provide in these random situations. Like, wow, I didn't see that happen. And that's when it opens up. That's when it opens up a moment of inspiration. The moment of inspiration we have is when we are awed by the fact that there is something bigger going on, that there's broader, life is bigger than we expected. Now, the thing is, they use that language, that moment in the past. So inspiration is only momentary, right? The experience of butterflies in your stomach when you meet someone amazing, or when the first time you have a breakthrough, when I was losing a bunch of weight, the first time I saw my weight drop, I got below 200, I got below 190, I got below 180. I'm like, what's going on, right? Now, what happens is if you spend a while in that moment of inspiration, we're amazed by the new job, and now you spend 15 minutes there, everybody knows, right, that the inspiration goes. So step number one of the spiritual growth process of kind of discovering yourself and discovering where you want to get to is the idea of inspiration. Inspiration is spurred by you leaving a place and then finding something out there before you've gotten to your goal that inspires you to realize that there is more to life. Life is broader and bigger than you expect. However, that is something that as soon as it appears will disappear and it will suddenly sink to the past. I'm going to pick up the next video.